quwwata illa billah. Continuing in this lesson that we ask Allah to bless in this blessed book, Matn Nabi Shuja', we are discussing Tayammum. And you'll remember that we said that we would divide the actions a little bit differently than the author divided them. So we'll discuss first the things that make Tayammum lawful, and then the conditions of Tayammum, and then the obligatory actions or integrals of Tayammum, and then also the things that invalidate Tayammum. So we've finished the discussion of the things that make Tayammum lawful, and we also briefly discussed things, the conditions of Tayammum. We'll come back over those. With respect to those things that make Tayammum lawful, what are they? What are the things that make Tayammum lawful? Again, based on our commentary, not based on just what Qadi Abi Shuja' mentioned, rahimahullah. Illness is one of them. Lack of water is another. Travel is typically the case, but travel basically means lack of water, and that typically occurs while traveling. Yeah. So illness. So basically there's three things that make Tayammum lawful, and some of them explain them as more, but in summary, a lack of water, which typically occurs while traveling, though not necessarily, though the jurists making deference to the Quranic expression mention that as travel, because Allah mentioned if you're traveling or if you're ill. And then the second is illness, and then the last is fear of thirst of an animal whose life is sacred, such as people as opposed to like a biting dog and so forth. And we discussed that in more detail. And so these are things that will make Tayammum lawful, and then we said that these in reality are causes for the thing that makes Tayammum lawful, which is, what is that? In reality, what is the thing that makes Tayammum lawful? Or you could say in reality, what is the excuse that allows you to make Tayammum? Inability to make wudu for some reason. That's in essence the excuse. However, that's not murattab ala alfad al-fuqaha. Al-mubih, al-haqiqi, the thing that makes Tayammum lawful, in reality, huwa al-ajzu an isti'mal al-ma' hissan aw shar'a. It is inability to use water, either physically or being rendered unable by the sacred law. And then those three causes we mentioned are actually in reality causes for that inability. The excuse in reality is that inability to use water, either physically being unable or being rendered unable by the sacred law. So if that happens, then we make Tayammum as an exception. And you understood that in the case of a lack of water, Tayammum can only occur when you're certain there's a lack of water, or that you've searched for water. And from that we understand that we shouldn't be haphazard about our Tayammum. That Tayammum is a dispensation with limited and specific circumstances in which you can do it. So doing Tayammum when there is water without the right conditions being met is not valid. So that's what we should take from that lesson. Tayammum isn't something we do often. Take this as a summary treatment. But the likelihood is if you get in a situation where you're ill or something and you have to make Tayammum, you're probably going to have to review. But at least understand these basics of Tayammum and understand that it can't be done haphazardly, that you actually have to look for water and determine that you in fact don't have water and are not able to make Tayammum, so that you understand that. And then with respect to illness, is it just any sickness that allows Tayammum, or are there specific aspects of that sickness? What are they? Okay, so you're allowed to do Tayammum if you fear an increase in an illness, or prolonging the illness, or You have 2. We gave you 4 things. Hat murattiban. Murattaban. You have it? La ilaha illallah. Okay. The illness that allows tayammum is that you fear sickness, meaning that you will become sick, or you fear from a sickness that you have, harm or pain, significant pain, and so forth, and of course life or limb. You fear an increase of an illness you already have, or its prolongation, or a blemish, a significant blemish on an exposed limb. So that is the sickness that makes tayammum permissible, or you could say the harm that makes tayammum permissible, and that's an important criteria to memorize, as we stated. So it should be in your notes, because we're going to revisit that many times in fiqh. If Allah blesses our lifespan and efforts, we'll revisit it, for instance, when fasting. That's what allows you to break fast, that type of sickness too. Tayyib. So then, continuing, the author discussed the conditions of tayammum, and he said, and we wanted to make a little bit of an addition on the conditions. He said that the time of prayer has entered, the time of prayer having entered. He mentioned it as a condition, seeking water, but again, that falls under what we've already discussed with respect to a lack of water, and when one has to search for it, and to the distance that one has to search for it, and when one doesn't. And he also mentioned an excuse or the incapacity to use water after seeking it, which we've discussed. And he mentioned the existence of pure earth containing dirt, but we mentioned that should be containing dust. And if it is mixed with gypsum and sand, it does not suffice. So basically this and the time entering are what are in fact conditions in terms of the treatment the way we're treating this question. So we're going to add a few conditions for you. So again, he mentioned that the prayer time has entered. That is one of the conditions. And another condition is that the tayammum be with earth, as opposed to stone or wood. And with some of the jurists, Allah's saying sa'idan tayyiba in the Quran applies to things other than earth, like stone and other things that are elevated above the earth. Kullu ma sa'ad ala al-ard, everything that raises up above the earth. But in the Shafi'i school, it is limited to earth, and earth that has dust. And then again, that earth, an additional condition, and he basically discussed that, is that the earth must be pure. So it can't be filthy. And also that the earth not be used, which we discussed. Used earth is that which remains on one's face or hands after having done tayammum there, or what falls off them after having done tayammum there. So we'll demonstrate how we would do tayammum, and when you lighten the earth from your hands, you should be careful not to do it over the place from which you're taking the earth, because then it'll be used. And also that the earth not be mixed with something else like flour or gypsum or other things. And we mentioned that they mix a lot of things into potting soil, so we wouldn't recommend tayammum with that. And also that the person transfer the earth, and this is also one of the obligations, so we're going to revisit that. Transferring the earth, not just rubbing it around. If you stood in the wind and just rubbed the earth around your face after it already got dusty, that doesn't work. You have to transfer it and then wipe yourself with it. And that you wash that the person wipe the hands and face, that the person wipe the face and arms up to including the elbows with 2 strikes. So they have to, meaning 2 transfers. So they strike the earth once and get earth on their hands, and then dust on their hands and wipe their face. They strike it again and then do it with their arms, and we'll demonstrate that. And that the person remove filth first. So the person has to remove filth first. And we mentioned if someone just has a little bit of water, precedence is given to removing filth. And that's from the body, filth from their body. So like doing istinja and so forth, they have to remove it first. And And some of the scholars say they have to find the Qibla first, but that's a difference of opinion. And then the last of the conditions is that they have to make tayammum for each obligatory prayer. So you can't make two obligatory prayers. Even if you didn't lose your ablution any other way, if you did tayammum for Dhuhr and then prayed it, you didn't lose ablution any other way, it's fine. You can do as many super sunnah prayers as you want up to Asr and voluntary prayers and hold the Quran and everything. But to pray the Asr prayer, for instance, you have to do a new tayammum. You have to do a new tayammum for each obligatory prayer. So those are conditions of tayammum. And now, inshallah ta'ala, we will treat the integrals of tayammum. And remember that we mentioned previously in wudu that each of these chapters we're going to have conditions and integrals or obligations and things that break, for instance, that type of purification. And those are the essence of the chapter. And one has to know how to perform those. And if you do so, then that act will be valid. That act of purification in this case will be valid. Barakallahu fikum. And then your prayer will be valid with that. Otherwise you won't. So he goes on. And Bismillah radiyallahu ankum. وَفَرَائِضُهُ أَرْبَعَةُ أَشْيَاءَ النِّيَّةُ وَمَسْحُ الْوَجْهِ وَالْيَدَيْنِ مَعَ الْمِرْفَقَيْنِ وَالتَّرْتِيبِ. Naam. La ilaha illallah. So, this author says, obligatory actions. We've understood obligatory actions. We're calling them obligatory integrals or integrals, arkan. It has 4 obligatory actions. That needs a comment. We're going to add 1, so it has 5. Okay? So there are 5 obligations of tayammum, and that's the way Imam Nawawi broke it down in Minhaj al-Talibin. The first, the author didn't mention, and that is transferring the earth. So the first is transferring the earth, and that is transferring the earth from, or you could say transferring dust from the ground or something else to the place you're wiping. So again, we've explained that. They mention that in the conditions as well, which is somewhat redundant, but sometimes, as opposed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, human speech, you can find fault with it. But in any case, transferring the earth is basically there's a dust storm. It's real windy. You can't just stand there and let a bunch of dust get on your face and then rub your face. You have to, for instance, tap the ground and then rub your face. Or catch the dust on your hands and then rub your face. But you couldn't just rub it around. Now say that the wind got you all dusty. My jacket's all dusty, for instance. I could transfer it from my jacket to my face, but you have to seek out the earth and get it and then move it to where you're wiping. And linguistically, that's what tayammum means in Arabic. Tayammum is qasd. So you sought out that thing and got it and then put it on yourself. You just can't just happen to get on you. As opposed to standing in a rainstorm with the intention of wudu, that would be okay. But not in the case of tayammum. So you have to transfer it from where it is to the place that you're wiping. That is the first of the integrals. And then, as we mentioned, that has to be done twice. And that's part of the conditions that be darbatain. The second is the intention. And he mentioned that as A. So intention. Tayammum is special with respect to the intention. Tayammum does not in fact purify you. It does purify you. It does not remove ritual impurity. Tayammum does not remove ritual impurity. It just makes things that are otherwise impermissible lawful. Right? So you can't make tayammum with the intention of wudu. Nor can you make the tayammum with the intention of rafa al-hadath, of lifting ritual impurity. Because you didn't lift the ritual impurity, you only made prayer lawful. So the intention of tayammum is nawaitu istibahata muftaqir ila wudu mathalan. or nawaitu istibaha ma yaftaqir ila tayammum. It's making that which needs tayammum permissible. Right? Making that which needs tayammum permissible, that's not the intention you make, but that's essentially the intention. So, what needs tayammum? Anything that is not permissible without purification. So, it might be prayer, tawaf, touching the Quran, carrying it, staying in a masjid, reciting Quran. It might be relations between the spouses, and so on. So the things that are not permissible when you need to make wudu or you need to make ghusl, those are the things that you make permissible by tayammum when you can't make wudu or ghusl. Right? So for instance, someone who hasn't made tayammum, who doesn't need to make ghusl but only needs to make wudu, they can recite Quran from memory. Right? Because you don't have to have ghusl to recite, or you don't have to make wudu to recite Quran from memory, but they can't touch or carry the Quran. So they would do tayammum, for instance, to be able to touch or carry the Quran. A woman who is menstruating who couldn't do ghusl and wanted to recite Quran, she would do tayammum to be able to recite the Quran. Or a man that needed to make ghusl from, one of the causes of ghusl for a man, he would make tayammum to be able to recite the Quran because he can't recite it prior to doing ghusl, and tayammum in his case is a replacement for ghusl. So basically those things that need tayammum are of 3 levels, right? So put level 1, obligatory prayer and tawaf. What is tawaf? Brothers are going to get angry with me if I tell you, but we should know it. Circumambulation. Make it plain, going around the Kaaba. Prayer or going around the Kaaba. Salah or tawaf. Circumambulation. So obligatory prayer or tawaf is level 1. Supererogatory prayers, supererogatory tawaf, and salat janazah are level 2. So that salat janazah is something of an exception because it's a communal obligation, not a personal obligation. But it is an obligation. Some of the scholars put the khutbah of Jummah at that level too. They differ about that. So level 2 is just prayer or circumambulation, that is sunnah or voluntary, and at that level is salat janazah. Level 3 are things like prayer, which includes everything else. That includes touching the Quran, carrying the Quran, reciting the Quran, staying in the mosque, permissibility between intimacy between the spouses, and so forth. And actually, we need to have a class specifically about those things that are forbidden, and we will actually have a class specifically about those things that are forbidden. So you'll see how all of those things are. There's up to 11 things, and they break down into these 3 levels in the case of tayammum. Okay, so the intention then is nawaitu istibahata fard as-salah. Level 1 intention is I intend making obligatory prayer permissible, or lawful you can say. Nawaitu istibahata fard as-salah. So that's level 1 intention. That's the strongest intention. Right? Someone who makes that intention, or they could say nawaitu istibahata fard at-tawaf. I intend making obligatory tawaf permissible. Right? They're on Hajj, for instance, and they're going to do their rukn tawaf, their integral tawaf. So that's level 1. That intention allows you one obligation and as much as you want of everything else until you invalidate your tayammum. But so one obligation and as much as you want of everything else. Someone does tayammum for dhuhr. Nawaitu istibahata fard as-salah. I intend making obligatory prayer lawful. Keep that intention without their glasses. They do tayammum Person I wrote white my whole arm, so I'll demonstrate in a minute. So then they pray Dhuhr. They can pray with that, the sunnah before Dhuhr, the sunnah after Dhuhr, then sit and recite Quran, for instance, if they were doing it for major ritual impurity, holding it, or reciting it, or if they're minor ritual impurity, holding it. They can prostrate for Quran recitation. If it were a lady and she did it for menstruation, she could still stay in the mosque and do i'tikaf. They could do anything they wanted. And then when Asr comes, for the obligatory Asr prayer, then they have to repeat it to pray Asr. But after having done it for the obligatory prayer, are allowed one obligation and everything they want to do from levels 2 and 3. However, say at duha time, they, going to do a tayammum just for duha prayer. So then they do a level 2 intention. And they say, Nawaitu istibahata nafla salah, or just as-salah. I intend making prayer permissible, or you could say voluntary prayer. Then they can pray the duha prayer, as many rakas as they want. They can pray other voluntary prayers after that. They can touch the Quran. They can prostrate for Quran recitation. They can do i'tikaf if they were doing it for major ritual period. All of those things. But when Dhuhr time comes in, they can't do Dhuhr prayer with that tayammum because it was a level 2 intention, so they can't go up to level 1 actions. You can go down, but you can't go up. Let me explain that, and then I'll take the questions. Third, it's Dhuhr time, and they haven't prayed Dhuhr yet, but they want to recite Quran. And they say, Nawaitu istibahata nahwa salah, or Nawaitu istibaha haml al-mushaf. So they say, I intend making things like prayer lawful, or I intend making carrying a Quran lawful. Then all they can do with that is recite Quran, or touch it, touch the Quran, or carry the Quran, or remain in a mosque, for instance, if they were doing it for major ritual impurity, or make things like intimacy lawful, but they can't pray with that because it's a level 3 intention, so they can't go up to level 2 or level 1 actions. Is that clear? Now the questions, okay.
Couldn't they not pray Dhuhr because they did the tayammum before Dhuhr?
That's an issue too, but that's why in the third example we said after Dhuhr time it came in. Yeah, that's correct. But in any case, our point is that they're not allowed to do an obligation. And that you're right, that they would have broken 2 conditions there. But in the third example, that's why we made it after Dhuhr time it came in. Yeah. And so your freak was next.
I was going to ask.
Same thing. Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask if they could make a level 1 intention at any time, but
No.
That would suffice for the conditions.
Yeah. The question was, can you make a level 1 intention at any time? No. And the answer is no. It's got to be, the time has to have entered for the action. Because tayammum is a purification of need, tahara, daruriya, so it is only valid after the obligatory time has entered.
But if you say you were coming to the mosque for Dhuhr prayer and then you made tayammum, but then you wanted to make the prayer for entering the mosque or something like that, would you have to make a whole separate one?
So you did tayammum at home for Dhuhr and then reached the mosque. Could you do the greeting the mosque prayer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that wouldn't matter because that's lower than
Yeah.
So that counts as doing all of the sunnah. So you could do the sunnah before Dhuhr also and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have to first do the one you made the intention for first and then everything else.
No, you don't. However, there's a point we'll mention that some of the scholars say that there has to be continuity between tayammum and the prayer, or they have to be consecutive, like you have to pray immediately after the tayammum, so it's safer to do that, especially for your obligatory prayers. So it's safer to do it immediately before the obligatory prayer, and with some of the scholars, such as it's as though the Maliki school, that's their position, it's safer to do that. Just do your tayammum and do the obligatory prayer right away. That's safest. Yes?
If you were to do tayammum Dhuhr time for Dhuhr prayer, when after time comes in and that tayammum broken,
No, it's not broken by the time coming in, but you can't pray Asr until yeah. في خلاف في المستحاضة متعلقة بذلك. في خلاف في المذهب في المستحاضة، لكن في التيمم ما في شيء. La ilaha illallah. Alhamdulillah. So that's inshallah ta'ala, that's clear. There's another point. What about the timing of the intention? Remember we said each work has a timing of intention. In tayammum, the timing, basically the intention has to be present at two places. When you begin transferring the earth and when you wipe your face. Right? Can it disappear between the two? Difference of opinion. Right? So, but typically, it's not going to disappear. Right? But so, I intend making obligatory prayer lawful. Right? Or I could do it. I intend making obligatory prayer lawful. So I've taken the earth. And then, that intention has to be present when I wipe my face as well. So one could just say also, I intend making obligatory prayer lawful. And wipe the face. And actually that should be wiped too. So the time of the intention is at the transferring of the earth and also while wiping the face. And if it disappears between the two, Ibn Hajar says no, and Imam Ramli says yes, and both of them can be followed, so it's no big deal. Tayyib, the third is wiping the face. And also what descends from the face of the surface of the beard is considered part of the face. Wiping the whole face must be done. One needn't get earth or dust to the roots of the hair, nor is it praiseworthy to do so. Right? So we'll just demonstrate after we discuss the hands. And then the hands, or the arms, La ilaha illallah. Number 3 was the face. And number 4 is wiping both arms, and how does he wiping the hands up to and including the elbows. Right? So number 4 is wiping the hands or arms from the fingertips up to including the elbows. Now we will demonstrate. Some of the scholars differed. The old school of the old Shafi school said that you just had to wipe up to the wrist bones. And that was the choice of Imam Nawawi in the school. And so what does that mean? That means we should be very careful and wipe our whole arms. Allah didn't mention, subhanahu, in the Quran, the elbows. And the scholars, again, so it's a probabilistic question. It leaves room for discussion. And in wudu, you do have to wipe those. So scholars differed. The safest thing for your personal practice, and from here on, is wiping up to and including the elbows. But if, for instance, in the past something happened, or if someone else, had made slight mistakes, don't be severe and tell them from here on do it better. But and this may happen, like someone who's doing tayammum. And because they have an IV and it's up their arm, that's nice for them to have that position. And they should still try to do their best, but it's still a position that gives a little bit of ease in severe and difficult circumstances. So we will demonstrate, insha'Allah ta'ala, how to wipe the face and arms in tayammum. And then the fifth of the integrals is order, right? So order is the last of the integrals, doing the aforementioned actions in order, so that you transfer coinciding with the intention, and then you wipe the face coinciding with the intention, then wipe the arms, and then you're done. Yeah, that's tayammum. 5 integrals. So let's say this was a big, nice pile of earth with dust. It's a big and nice dusty piece of ground. So tayammum. We read in the Tuesday night class from the beginning of guidance, and Imam Ghazali mentioned to separate your fingers in the second time, just the first time you strike, but actually the other jurists mentioned separating the fingers all the time. And also you should remove your ring. And it's obligatory to remove your ring for the second time because it's covering part of what needs to be wiped. So, if I'm doing tayammum, I intend making obligatory prayer lawful, and I strike. Now I have dust on my hands. It's sunnah to decrease that, so then I don't do it over my pile. At this point it doesn't really matter, but just decrease it a little bit so you're not, getting yourself super dirty and stuff. And then that intention has to be present now as well. I intend making obligatory prayer lawful. And then you just wipe. That's the face. And then I do it again, and this time I've already made my intention, so I don't have to do an intention. And this time I definitely have to decrease the earth here, because if it falls back there, and this is my one piece of ground I'm using, I can't come back and use it again. So then the way you wipe the hands is you take the back of the right hand and put it so that so the fingertips don't go beyond the index finger of the left hand. Right? So it's like this. Why? Because if my fingers were beyond, I wouldn't have wiped my fingers. So you keep your fingers below there, and then you're going to keep the thumbs raised. So you wipe until you get to your wrist, and then you wrap your fingers around your wrist. And then you keep on wiping, and then you turn it over, and then wipe back down, keeping the thumb up, and then wipe the thumb with the thumb. Right? And then you do the other, same way. Come down and then grab it so that you get the whole thing, and then turn it over and come back down and then wipe the thumb with the thumb, and then it's sunnah to do this. So that's it. I intend making obligatory prayer lawful. Intend making obligatory prayer lawful. Right? And then that's it. And that is tayammum. Inshallah ta'ala, with 5 integrals. Transferring, intention, wiping the face, wiping the arms up to including the elbows, and order. Naam.
You say the point of contact on the ground. You said the first time you make it one foot and the second time you make it another.
No, you don't have to do it 2 different places, but if I go like this, the second time, and I decrease the earth right here, right, and it falls back there, then that's used. So I couldn't use it again. Right, so you just decrease it somewhere else. Yeah, and that's important the second time, because it'll be used from the second, not from the first. Because the first, the first time it's not cleaning the hands, it's going to be used for the face. But the second time, the earth that's on your hands is for your hands. So if it falls back off them, it fits the definition of used earth, which is what's fallen off, what remains on the limb or has fallen off it. Amen? Is that clear? La ilaha illallah. Alhamdulillah. Khairun. So the author didn't mention the sunnahs of tayammum, so we'll mention there are many. Some of them are doing the siwak. When is the siwak done? Prior to transferring the earth. I intend siwak for tayammum. Then, boom. The basmalah. And similarly, it should be at that point, like with the first strike, for instance, or just before. Doing the right first. So wiping the right arm before the left arm. And also doing it with continuity, meaning you do it right after. And it has the same meaning as continuity in wudu, which we didn't really define there. We should have. Continuity is a sunnah of wudu, and in cases it can become obligatory. It's an obligation with Imam Malik. And it is that you wash the second part prior to the first part drying in moderate conditions. Right? So like say you're making wudu and you wash your face. That you wash the arms prior to the face drying in moderate conditions. Meaning it's not hot, like moderate temperature, and you have a moderately bodily disposition. Like you're not feverish or your skin's not really, really dry or something. So that in moderate conditions, that the face doesn't dry before the arms are washed. That's what continuity means. That the actions are consecutive, and that's a sunnah in tayammum as well. And that's an important one. And also, continuity between the tayammum and the prayer is also a sunnah, And it's a very important sunnah because some of the scholars say that it's obligatory. So avoiding that difference of opinion is important, and continuity there means pretty much right away you pray, and you don't do things that aren't in the interest of the prayer between the tayammum and the prayer. La ilaha illallah. And spreading the fingers is a sunnah. Facing the qibla is a sunnah. And any sunnahs of wudu that you can do other than doing it 3 times. So the dhikrs and so forth. Those are sunnahs here as well. And Allah knows best. MashaAllah. That's tayammum. Please. Sure.
So like going to like the working for like the post office or like delivering packages is allowed.
Should be, yeah.
So what about because once I worked for UPS and like they would have packages that would be like lying or something, and like the only reason why you know is because like you have to get like a signature or something. So like how would you deal with that? Because you just like not delivering the package.
That's an issue for the Shafi'is. Based on fatwas I've seen by Hanafi faqihs that I trust, it should be permissible in the Hanafi school. Yeah. So the question was doing deliveries and delivering alcohol. In the Shafi'i school that would be problematic, though we've seen fatwas by Hanafis that we trust in their school that would seem to indicate that would be permissible in their school. And the fatwa in specific was about working at a checkout counter at a supermarket. Yeah. Yeah. Where the person isn't the owner, and Allah knows best. There's some latitude there in the Hanafi school. Alhamdulillah.
So another kind of work-related question. So the sexes should be segregated. Like so in a classroom, especially like when you're in non-Muslim public schools and stuff like that, you have mixed classroom, and even you have activities that that might even mix classrooms, even if you're in let's just say a mixed classroom where the classrooms are segregated. I mean the sexes are segregated, and like you have activities that kind of mix them.
The question was about being in classrooms and segregation of the 2 sexes and being a teacher. La ilaha illallah. Okay, first of all, in the Shafi'i school, what would impermissible mixing of the sexes be? It would be when they're both in a place and some forbidden activity is occurring, such as the nakedness of someone being exposed. So like ladies and men are at a table and some of the ladies have their head uncovered, which is legal nakedness for those men to see that. So there's a forbidden glance there. Then that would be forbidden mixing. Or if they're alone, a man and a woman are alone in a place where it's possible by common acknowledgement for something forbidden to occur, like being alone in an apartment together. That would be forbidden. Or if looking, even if or speaking or touching, even if the nakedness is covered in a manner that stirs up shahwa, which we could call desire, or it causes temptation, which means that the person wants to be alone with that person for forbidden reasons. So the things that interaction where these type of impermissible activities occur is impermissible mingling, right? But say there's women and men sitting at a table, for instance, and all of the ladies and men have all of their nakedness covered. And no one is engaging in a forbidden glance that stirs desire or causes temptation, or any speech or any touching or anything else like that. Technically, that is not forbidden mixing, though, as the Prophet ﷺ said, someone who wanders around the sanctuary is likely to fall into it. So that's in prophetic tradition, meaning that it's not unlikely that desire would occur if men and women are around each other a lot, in younger ages especially. So for that reason, you'll find Islam guide us away from that. But technically, that's not impermissible mixing. Is it adab? Certainly in many places and time it is not. Is it the etiquette of a husband and a father and the head of a household not to have a protectiveness of his women folk and not want them to be in those type of situations because he knows what's likely to occur? That's a different discussion. But talking about permissibility or not, that should be understood. Then, anywhere that you need to be for a need that is significant and only possible by being in that place in the sacred law, any need that is considered significant and permissible in the sacred law and only possible to accomplish in that place, it is permissible to be in a place like that while disobedience is occurring. So, for instance, being in a classroom where you are learning that which you need for your livelihood or fulfilling communal obligations or other things, or where you're working in order to earn your livelihood, those are certainly needs acknowledged by the sacred law. So to enter such a place while forbidden activities are occurring is permissible, and one should just not engage in them oneself. So, for instance, looking at the awrah of a woman, one should lower one's gaze or avert one's gaze from that and not focus one's eyes right on that. And then another issue is our invitation of non-Muslims to Allah is just that commanding the good and forbidding the wrong is an obligation, and when a wrong is occurring that you can't forbid, you have to remove yourself from that situation. However, with non-Muslims, the wrong that we forbid them is disbelief, and the good that we invite them to and command them is belief. And everything else is after that. So it's not the same to be where non-Muslims are doing things that would be forbidden as things that are forbidden as actions. Being where non-Muslims are doing that isn't the same as being where Muslims are doing that, because the issue with non-Muslims is inviting them to faith, whereas the Muslims have already entered the faith. So then we have the obligation of those individual actions. So that should be understood as well. Yeah, so all of those are considerations in non-Muslim society. And then the other thing is, so being in a classroom, for instance, provided that you don't have forbidden glances or forbidden looking, meaning that it's looking at the nakedness or looking at the beauty of or attractiveness of the opposite sex in a way that stirs desire or causes temptation, or you're speaking about those things. As long as those type of forbidden activities are not occurring and you have some relevant reason to be there, it's permissible to be there. And if in addition to that you're inviting them to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's what we're here for. And if one doesn't have places and times in which they interact with non-Muslims, they won't be able to invite them to Allah. And if they're interacting with non-Muslims, they're going to invariably encounter situations where there are the genders together. So they just should move in those situations, being guided by Allah's command and with on guidance and insight and tranquility and good character, and inviting those people to Allah is one of the best works we can do when we're here. So if someone who goes into those situations like that, they'll find light and they'll find tranquility, and inshallah ta'ala they'll find that it has an impact on people embracing Islam and being guided, inshallah ta'ala. Allah knows best. We should go ahead. If it's follow-up, yeah.
In the instance where teaching overseas in a Muslim country where, you know, the university wants mixing?
Yeah.
The difference?
From the point of view of commanding and forbidding, it could. From the point of view of commanding and forbidding, it could, because there would be the obligation to command and forbid the specific actions of those people, and if one was not able, specific was about working at a checkout counter at a supermarket. Yeah. Yeah. Where the person isn't the owner, and Allah knows best. There's some latitude there in the Hanafi school.
So another kind of related question. So the sexes should be segregated. Like, so in a classroom, especially like when you're you know, in a non-Muslim, you know, public schools and stuff like that, you know, mixed classroom, and even you know, we have activities that, you know, that might even mix classrooms, even if you're in a, let's just say a mixed classroom where the classrooms are segregated. I mean, the sexes are segregated, and like you have activities that kind of mix them. That's the one.
The question was about being in classrooms and segregation of the two sexes. And being a teacher. La ilaha illallah. Okay, first of all, in the Shafi'i school, what would impermissible mixing of the sexes be? It would be when they're both in a place and some forbidden activity is occurring, such as the nakedness of someone being exposed. So like ladies and men are at a table and some of the ladies have their head uncovered, which is legal nakedness for those men to see that. So there's a forbidden glance there. Then that would be forbidden mixing. Or if they're alone, a man and a woman are alone in a place where it's possible by common acknowledgement for something forbidden to occur, like being alone in an apartment together. That would be forbidden. Or if looking, even if or speaking or touching, even if the nakedness is covered in a manner that stirs up shahwa, which we could call desire, or it causes temptation, which means that the person wants to be alone with that person for forbidden reasons. So the things that interaction where these type of impermissible activities occur is impermissible mingling, right? But say there's women and men sitting at a table, for instance, and all of the ladies and men have all of their nakedness covered, and no one is engaging in a forbidden glance that stirs desire or causes temptation, or any speech or any touching or anything else like that. Technically that is not forbidden mixing, though as the Prophet ﷺ said, you know, someone who wanders around the sanctuary is likely to fall into it. So that's in prophetic tradition, meaning that it's not unlikely that desire would occur if men and women are around each other a lot, in you know, younger ages especially. So for that reason, you'll find Islam guide us away from that. But technically, that's not impermissible mixing. Is it adab? Certainly in many places in time it is not. Is it the etiquette of a husband and a father and the head of a household not to have a protectiveness of his women folk and not want them to be in those type of situations because he knows what's likely to occur? That's a different discussion. But talking about permissibility or not, that should be understood. Then anywhere that you need to be for a need that is significant and only possible by being in that place in the sacred law. Any need that is considered significant and permissible in the sacred law and only possible to accomplish in that place, it is permissible to be in a place like that while disobedience is occurring. So, for instance, being in a classroom where you are learning that which you need for your livelihood or fulfilling communal obligations or other things, or where you're working in order to earn your livelihood, those are certainly needs acknowledged by the sacred law. So to enter such a place while forbidden activities are occurring is permissible, and one should just not engage in them oneself. So, for instance, looking at the aura of a woman, one should lower one's gaze or avert one's gaze from that and not focus one's eyes right on that. And then another issue is our invitation of non-Muslims to Allah is just that commanding the good and forbidding the wrong is an obligation, and when a wrong is occurring that you can't forbid, you have to remove yourself from that situation. However, with non-Muslims, the wrong that we forbid them is disbelief, and the good that we invite them to and command them is belief. And everything else is after that. So it's not the same to be where non-Muslims are doing things that would be forbidden as things that are forbidden as actions. Being where non-Muslims are doing that isn't the same as being where Muslims are doing that, because the issue with non-Muslims is inviting them to faith, whereas the Muslims have already entered the faith. So then we have the obligation of those individual actions. So that should be understood as well. So all of those are considerations in non-Muslim society. And then the other thing is, So being in a classroom, for instance, provided that you don't have forbidden glances or forbidden looking, meaning that it's looking at the nakedness or looking at the beauty of or attractiveness of the opposite sex in a way that stirs desire or causes temptation, or you're speaking about those things. As long as those type of forbidden activities are not occurring and you have some relevant reason to be there, it's permissible to be there. And if in addition to that you're inviting them to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's what we're here for. And if one doesn't have places and times in which they interact with non-Muslims, they won't be able to invite them to Allah. And if they're interacting with non-Muslims, they're going to invariably encounter situations where there are the genders together. So they just should move in those situations, being guided by Allah's command and with on guidance and insight and tranquility and good character, and inviting those people to Allah is one of the best works we can do when we're here. So if someone who goes into those situations like that, they'll find light and they'll find tranquility, and inshallah ta'ala they'll find that it has an impact on people embracing Islam and being guided, inshallah ta'ala. Allah knows best. We should go ahead. If it's follow-up,
In an instance where I'm teaching overseas in a Muslim country where the university wants mixing, make a difference?
From the point of view of commanding and forbidding, it could. From the point of view of commanding and forbidding, it could, because there would be the obligation to command and forbid the specific actions of those people, and if one was not able